What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and you know, out of all the videos that we do on this channel, this is the video series that I get the most value out of. And to me, that's saying a lot, right? We do a lot of data dives, we do a lot of trend analysis, like we look a lot at how previous products have performed to give us some idea of how similar products now might perform in the future. So for me to say that I get the most value out of this video, I think that says a lot, right? One of the things that we talk about all the time is trying to keep our finger on the pulse of the hobby as a whole, right? Like macro level information. And I don't think there's any better indication of macro level hobby movements than what we're going to talk about in this video today. So what are we going to look at? We're going to start off by looking at PSA, SGC, CGC, and Beckett and their actual grading volumes for the month of December. Then we're going to double click into PSA because as you'll see on the next slide, like PSA's grading volume is so far and above everybody else's. Like that is clearly the best indicator of the overall hobby trends as a whole. So we're going to double click into PSA. We're going to look at the most graded sets. We're going to look at the most graded Pokemon. We're going to look at the most graded individual cards. We're going to look at gem rates by grading brand. Like all kinds of cool stuff is chalked into this video, and that's why I get so excited about sharing it with you. And the other thing that's really exciting to me is 99.9% of this is going to involve Pokemon, but this TCG grading data, like it includes all TCG cards, right? Pokemon, Magic the Gathering. Now we got Lorcana. Now we got One Piece, right? Like Lorcana showed up on last month's video. We'll have to wait and see if it made it to month number 2. But guess what? Spoiler alert, we're going to see One Piece in this video. And I know a lot of people, you know, are either dipping a toe or heck, some of y'all are diving headfirst into Lorcana. So seeing it on here, again, I just think it's really cool to give us a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the TCG space as a whole. So with that being said, listen, if you like and appreciate this type of data-driven approach, we'd love it if you hit the subscribe button. We have an amazing community. We'd love for you to be a part of it. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Questions or comments, drop them down below. The reality is those 3 small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and it really lets me know you appreciate the work that I put in. So with that being said, let's get into the data because as I said, there's a lot to unpack here in this video. Now, PSA just had another banner month, right? Like PSA, the CEO has come out and he said, my goal is to grade 1.25 million cards per month. Well, last month they finished at 1.23, which is pretty darn close. But what's even more exciting to me is we have these 3 graphs right here, okay? The one on the left is all 4 grading companies, including PSA. And as I said earlier, like PSA's grading volume is so high, everybody else just kind of looks like ants at the bottom of the hill. So then in the middle graph right there, we pull PSA out. That way we can actually see some trends and some movements for SGC, CGC, and Beckett. But then on the right, this is the one that really gets me excited here, is this is actual items graded in the TCG space by company for last month. And CGC was down 20% in the TCG space. Beckett was down 15% in the TCG space. SGC was down 30% in the TCG space. But guess what? PSA was up 7% month over month in the TCG space, and they were up 33% year over year. Now, those other brands did see some big growth year over year, but PSA won month over month and they won year over year. Now, SGC has actually had a pretty strong trend line up until the December month. So it might have just been an off month for them. You know, they're the gray line there in that middle graph. If you trend line that out, you know, SGC was heading on a pretty good trajectory. Now, CGC had that crazy month. You see that green spike where it just kind of comes out of nowhere. You know, they partnered with a mystery box company and they graded a ton of cards for that mystery box company, and they included it obviously in their grading report, which is what caused that big spike. But now that they've already done that, they fulfilled that order, you're seeing CGC really start to come back down. And then Beckett is at a 1-year low last month, which is just, it's just insane, right? When we look at PSA always has a really good December. So my hope was that we would see these other companies have a good December as well, because I really want somebody to come out of left field and challenge PSA. Like, yes, I'm a PSA guy. Yes, I love them. You know, that's what all my cards are slabbed in. But I think all markets do good when there's a 1A and a 1B. And right now there's PSA and just everybody else is kind of scrapping the bottom of the barrel. So I'm sad about Beckett. I love Beckett. I've got a lot of, you know, old school ties to Beckett back in my, you know, my early collecting days when I'd have to go to the mailbox and pick up the Beckett magazine. So I'm pulling for them in the long run. They are up year over year, 7%, but certainly not a great month for Beckett. So now that we see how they performed at the macro level, here's the other thing that I wanted to call out. Look at the trends for PSA, okay? We are trending very similarly in 2023 to the way PSA trended in 2022. Now, that's going to be really important as we start to look at how, what we could expect maybe for January, February, March, right? As we get further into this video, you're going to see some trends which might give us the opportunity to identify, hey, is January a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell? Like, is it a good time to send my cards in and get them graded? There's all kinds of cool stuff, but I'm always looking for trends, and it seems, at least to this point, that PSA's grading pattern seems to be following some seasonality trends, which is really, really exciting. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about right here was the most graded sets in the TCG space. Now, if you had watched this video, I think 3 or 4 months ago, this list was dominated by Japanese sets. Like, it was 10 out of 10, all Japanese sets on this list. But what we've seen is now the English sets are kind of starting to work their way back up, right? We had talked about, hey, Japanese was a little too hot. We felt like it was, maybe Icarus flying a little too close to the sun. And now it is split 50-50. We got 5 Japanese sets on here, and we have 5 English sets on here. Now, Japanese still claims king to the number one. Japanese 151 is way up there, but English 151 is coming in at second place right there. It's really exciting to see that. I think these 2 151 sets are just going to get graded to oblivion, which might make some of the singles cards, in PSA 10 holders really approachable for us who are trying to collect it and, build a great set out of it. So that is interesting. But then you got the Japanese Sword and Shield V-Star Universe coming in at number 3, and then you got the English Black Star promos at number 4, and the Japanese Black Star promos there at number 5. Now, one of the things I wanted to call out is, look at this. You have these 3 columns here. So we've got the set name right there. Then you've got the total graded all time, total graded in December, and then the growth versus November. The thing that I'm focused on is that total graded all time. Look at Japanese 151. It's already at 185,000 cards from the Japanese 151 set has been graded. That is a ton of cards. Like, none of the English sets are even close except for this Crown Zenith set right there, which is at 142,000. But again, Crown Zenith came out in January of last year, and I think Japanese 151 dropped in, June of last year. So, Sword and Shield's, older, and it's got way 40,000 less cards graded. Like, that is one of the things that concerns me. And as we get into this video, you're going to see this trend kind of continue, is that these Japanese cards are just getting graded absolutely into oblivion. Another great example is, look at that Japanese Sword and Shield V-Star Universe. 354,000 of those cards have been graded. That is an insane number right there. When you look at the 1999 Pokemon game down there in English, 744,000 of those have been graded. Now, just so you know, that 1999 Pokemon game bucket, that includes first edition, it includes Shadowless, it includes base set, it includes base set 2, like all of them. Everything from that 1999 Pokemon game is lumped into there, and still that has only had 744,000 cards graded versus Japanese V-Star Universe, which has seen 354,000 graded, and it still continues to grow. Like, there was 18,000 of those V-Star Universe cards graded last month in December. For me, it's just very interesting to see. I don't know what that means. Again, this whole video is keeping a finger on the pulse of what's going on, in the hobby as a whole. But what I will say is this: what I continue to see over and over again is these Japanese cards, especially now that PSA has opened up that grading center over in Japan, are just getting graded and graded and graded. Now, the other thing that I called out was, listen, I said this is all TCG. Guess what? Lorcana, the first chapter, was on here last month. It has fallen off, but that is something of note. And I do know that this is the first month that we've seen English 151 on here. So we'll have to give it a couple months to see if English 151's grading volume even comes close to Japanese 151 grading volume. But either way, I think both of these sets are going to be graded a ton, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because those cards are awesome, and the more they're graded, the more affordable they will be, at least in the short run, for all of us. Now, getting into the most graded cards specifically, speaking about having a lot of it graded, look at that Pikachu with gray felt hat. It's already at almost 15,000 cards graded. Last month alone, over 8,000 of them were graded. Now, I don't know I don't know how many were printed. None of us know how many were printed, right? We don't know how many went to the museum itself. We don't know how many were distributed on the Pokemon Center through that absolute disaster of a launch that they did, not once but twice. And I'll tell you right now, if it wasn't for my awesome Discord group, I know I would have missed out on it. And I know that a lot of people did. So it'll be interesting to see if that card continues to climb, but this is back-to-back months where Pikachu with gray felt hat has been number one. Now, the other thing that out of this is Pikachu itself. That character has 4 of the top 5 spots here when it comes to the most graded cards, which is really, really cool. I'm a big Pikachu fan, obviously, PikaPikaPaPa. And again, just like we saw with the most graded sets, half of these cards are English, half of these cards are Japanese. But what jumped off the page at me is when I averaged out the all-time graded number for the Japanese cards, the 5 Japanese cards on here, and when I averaged out the all-time graded number for the 5 English cards on here, the average all-time graded for the English cards was 6,000 and the average for the Japanese was 10,000. Again, just these cards are getting graded in absolute insane quantities. What does that mean? I have no clue. We're going to have to keep an eye on it. We're going to have to trend it out. We're going to have to watch how the prices move. But it's interesting to see awesome cards like that Pikachu Art Rare from Japanese 151, already over 14,000 graded. That awesome Iono card from Clayburst, we've talked about that a lot, over 14,000 graded. Like that Yokohama Pikachu, I talked about it. I thought it was one of the most iconic cards of 2023. Almost 9,000 have already been graded and it still has a lot more to go. So just something to think about. Again, we'll have to see where it all shakes out, but really interesting to see these incredibly high grading card volumes for these Japanese cards. Now, getting into the next one right here, this is grades by category from PSA, and this is something that I started trending, obviously, all the way since December when I first started doing this. And you see the part in blue and you see the part in yellow, and this is my big call out. So what I do is I take the total number of TCG cards and I just do it against the total number of baseball, basketball, and football cards that are graded to me. Like those are the big ball sports, baseball, basketball, football, obviously. So I sum those up and I compare them to TCG because I had this theory back when I switched from sports cards to Pokemon cards, was that Pokemon cards is going to become a much bigger basket for collecting and investing in the long run than sports cards, which is crazy to say out loud, but I just think that everything is here in this Pokemon market that you and I love so much to make this be the big breadwinner when it comes to cardboard collecting of the future. And what's been happening here is you see that when I first started this, sports cards were dominant, right? Like December, January, February, you see that TCG only made up 81.5%, then it only made up 70%, then 94.6%. You see most of those, 94.6 was the highest, but it was really 70s and 80s from December to June. And then we started to see that trend shift in July, right? July, August, September, October, November. I mean, if you look at that 1, 2, 3, 4 of those months, TCG was graded more than baseball, basketball, and football combined. Now, that is extremely exciting for me. It should be extremely exciting for you because, again, the goal of this is to be involved in the biggest part of the hobby, and I think TCG is absolutely the spot to be, and this data certainly confirms that from a grading standpoint, there's more going on in the TCG space than in any of the big ball sports. Now, the next one right here is the most graded subjects, and it has been fascinating to me. Again, I looked at this chart for years and years, long before the PikaPikaPaPa channel even came into existence, and Charizard was always number one, like hands down number one. Guess what? Pikachu has been number one for 6 months in a row now. Hats off to you, Mr. Pikachu. Absolutely love it. But you see that the gap was really narrow last month, right? There was 48.8 thousand Pikachu cards versus 46.6 thousand Charizard cards. The other thing that I want to call out is up until this recent data set, Mew and Mewtwo were combined into one. Now the awesome people at gemrate.com, which is where I get all this information for, went ahead and broke out Mew and Mewtwo for us. So that gives us a better idea of the overall grading volume there. And again, we've seen Marnie, we've seen Lily on this. This is the first time we've actually seen no trainers on this list for a long time. Marnie had a very spirited fight. We don't normally see a trainer on here for more than 1 or 2 months in a row, and I think Marnie was on here the last 4 months. So she fought hard. It's okay that she's dropped off. It's exciting to see Eevee on the list, and as I said, here comes One Piece. I'm sure I'm gonna mispronounce Monkey D. Luffy or whatever the heck it is, Luffy. I don't know anything about One Piece. But guess what? That's a One Piece card, and it cracked the top 10 of the most graded subjects here in the TCG space. So again, that is going to be something to keep our finger on the pulse of and something to watch moving forward, right? Last month we saw Lorcana, first chapter on the most graded set list. This month it dropped off. This month we got a character here on the most graded subjects list. It'll be interesting to see if it can maintain its momentum and stay on there for 2 months in a row. Now, getting into the next set right here, I told you we would talk about GemRate by era, by grading company, and I think everybody needs to take this with a huge grain of salt. For me, this is just a fun slide, like, pretty much the gem rates for the 2020 era, so for ultra modern cards, pretty much stayed the same month over month. And I know we talk a lot about quality here in the TCG space, but again, look at the sports card space. It could be worse when you look at the 2020s eras. I mean, PSA Sports was at 51.1% gem rate. TCG was at 67.1% gem rate. Beckett Sports was at 48.5% gem rate. Beckett TCG was at 77.4% gem rate. Now you got to take that with a grain of salt because you would think most people send to Beckett in order to try and get that, really coveted black label, but you don't see that transcend on the sports side as well. So just really, really interesting. And again, I think we got it a little better than we think we do when it comes to quality here in the TCG space, or at least those ultra modern gem rates seem to suggest that we do. Now, As I say all the time, I would not use this as a barometer as to who to grade with. You should grade with whatever label you like the best, whichever company you think is going to give you the most satisfaction and the best opportunity for future price appreciation. But when you look at the gem rates for the 2020 era, Beckett's number 1, PSA's number 2, CGC's number 3, and SGC comes in at number 4. Again, take it with a grain of salt. More of a fun slide than anything, but it is cool to watch these numbers move month over month. Now, the next one I want to talk about here is the trends. And this is what I was talking about early on, like the TCG cards graded at PSA by month. Now, the biggest thing I want to call out is ever since PSA opened that grading center in Japan, it has been absolutely crazy. Look at the July. Look at the big spike in July. From June, it went from 362,000 cards graded to July, where we saw 514,000 TCG cards graded. Now, again, we've talked earlier in the video about how these sets are being graded, and the singles are being graded in the Japanese market. Again, they have this new shiny object. They have their own grading center there. So I expect a bunch of people are getting things graded, and I do think it'll slow down over time. But one of the interesting things is to look at January of 2022 and January of 2023 here on this graph, right? Like January typically is a very, very soft month when it comes to grading volume. Now, I don't know how that correlates to pricing because, hey, guess what? The PikaPikaPaPa channel was just getting fired up last year, but it will be really interesting for us to continue our trend analysis in regards to pricing for Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. And heck, we even do XY here on this channel to see how they correlate, and if the grading volume goes down, to see if the price movement goes as well. I don't foresee any of that happening. This might actually just indicate it's a great time to send your cards in, because if the grading volume is lower, it's not like they have less people grading. You might be able to get really quick turnaround times, which would be very, very exciting. The biggest call out to me on this graph right here is look at this. If you trend line this out, this is up and to the right. Like the TCG grading space is incredibly strong. It's stronger than ever. And this is what really gets me excited. And this is one of the reasons why I think I'm so incredibly bullish on TCG just in the long run in terms of event stability, collectability, and all of us being in a great spot for future price growth. Now, again, we want the overall grading space to be strong. We want the overall cardboard collecting space to be strong. So I always end with this graph right here. Now, again, as I said, we're following the exact same pattern in 2022 as we are right now, which is really exciting. We could see a softening in the grading market over the next 2 months, because that's what we saw, heading up into 2023 and into, what will be 2024 here in the next, couple months. We'll have to see where this is. Again, I'm hearing that bulk value submissions right now at PSA are coming back in record time. So if you got some cards you've been kind of on the fence about sending them in, and if you have any money left over after Christmas, might be a good time to send them in. And the biggest thing that I always end with on this video is, listen, short-term prices are going to go up, prices are going to go down, but the biggest thing for me is you want to make sure that you are involved in a very healthy marketplace with a whole lot of strength. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think there is a healthier, stronger, more robust marketplace right now than the TCG space. I think we're in a great position for great results, and hey, if nothing else, we have an incredible hobby to enjoy along the way. So I hope you found value in this video. Questions or comments, drop them down below. If you like what you saw, give us a thumbs up. And if you made it to the end and haven't hit that subscribe button, why don't you go ahead and do it? You got a lot more awesome content coming for you this year. I appreciate you, and have an epic one. See ya.